Let's talk. Let's talk. Giles Brown. Let's talk.
I have two of my favourite people in the studio with me, talking about some of my favourite subjects, he said through gritted piece. It is the time when we are joined by Claudia and Javier from Spence Clarke. Good morning to you. Ladies first, good morning to you.
Good morning, Giles.
How you doing?
Very well.
You've got colour. Have we been to Costa de la Luz?
No, I'm just walking. Not yet. In La Luz, not in Tarifa yet.
I had an American TV crew over last week, and I was showing them around Marbella, and I said, "Have you heard of Tarifa?" And they were like, "No." And I said, that's where we go to relax in Marbella." And he's like, "But this place is..." I said, "Just trust me. Go to Bologna." So, and Javier, how are you, my friend?
Hello, good morning.
You're looking very cool.
Well, working a lot during this period of the year.
Yeah. How was your Semana Santa? Did we all... Blimey, it was busy, wasn't it? It was busy.
I went to Madrid.
You went to
the
Madrid?
Other way around.
Very good. That's it. When Madrid comes here, you go to Madrid. Perfect. Okay, so today we are talking about three things. We're talking about income, wealth, and...
Your favourite declaration.
The grandes fortunas, the large cigarettes from the 80s.
Exactly, we're talking about,
So we got the M720 declaration out of the way, but this, as they say, this was just the start. Which are the yearly tax declarations for individuals? When are they due next?
Yes, okay, so we've just mentioned them, and the deadlines for the income and the wealth tax is the 30th of June.
Yeah.
And although if you want to split the payment and make a mandate up so that the tax office takes it from your bank, so a direct debit mandate, you need to file by the 25th of June, not the 30th, okay?
Okay.
And then the wealth and the great fortunes tax, unfortunately, cannot be split. You have to pay it in one go. For the wealth tax, again, if you want to make a direct debit payment, it's on the 25th of June. And for the great fortunes tax, it's the 31st of July.
Okay, fine. So who out there needs to submit an income tax declaration? Avi?
Well, in general terms, I will say everyone, unless they are explicitly exempt. This is radically different to other countries where filing a return is not expected for many people. But in Spain, most people who are living here and working here, it's not that complicated, and you are not generally required to file the return if you only have income from one Spanish employer, and your total annual gross income from that employment is 22,000 euros or less. However, you must file if you have earned more than those 22,000 euros from the single employer, or if you had more than one employer and the income from the second and others exceeds 1,500 euros, and your total Spanish employment income is over 15,876 euros.
The 6 is very important.
Of course.
Not 5, but the 76 is very important.
So lucky there wasn't a comma 0.7.
Because of the euro translation, And also, of course, if you receive other types of income, such as foreign income, salaries, fees, pensions, and again with the limit of 15,000 whatever, or if you have rental income or deemed rental income for properties over 1,000 euros, regardless where the property is in the world, or investment income over 1,600 euros. We are talking about worldwide income, not only Spanish income, of course, and also it's maybe important to submit a declaration if you want to claim some deduction or benefits, like maternity, paternity deductions, for those who are still lucky, the one for buying a home before 2013, or if you want to apply contribution to pension plans. Why? Because maybe during the year you have been withheld by your employer the monthly tax, and by applying these deductions you are able, and benefits, you are able to reclaim a refund to the tax office.
Okay, just looking at is this so? If none of the above comply, Do I have to, if I'm under that, for example, if I'm under that 22,000 euros, do I need to put in an income plan direction? Or
No. If you follow those simple instructions just given by Javier, and you're below, then happy you don't have to submit a declaration. However,
there's a however.
If you ever need a certificate of tax residency issued by the tax office, the only way they can issue it if you have filed a tax return. Why would you need this certificate? Well, maybe if you want to renew your residencia, your TIE, or maybe because you're complying with a double tax treaty. You never know. So we always at Spence Clarke say, even if you don't have to file a tax return, do it. Especially for foreigners. Very important.
Yeah, because again, if you're renewing your residencia, your TIE, that's going to get you certain tax exemptions, yeah?
Correct,
right.
Yeah.
What about, wealth tax? And here we go. And the tax on the grandes fortunas.
Okay. As you remember, the wealth tax is autonomous tax return.
So in Andalusia, it's different from what it is in...
Because the autonomous regions were luckily depends where you live, decided to change the allowances. The general allowance is 700,000 plus 300 on your home. However, regions like Catalonia and Valencia, they're very mean, and they decided to lower it to 500,000, which is very unfair. When the Great Fortunes tax declarations was introduced, the allowance is 3.7 million euros. Therefore, because of that, many regions like Madrid, Andalusia, Murcia, Cantabria increased their wealth tax deduction, and therefore to this limit to 3.7. So in these regions, if your worldwide assets is below 3.7, you do not need to file a wealth tax return. And if it's above, you would only need to file a Great Fortunes tax. Now, for those regions like Cantabria and Catalonia, and Valencia, where the limit is 500,000, and unfortunately, if they were above that amount and they had to file a wealth tax, what happens is when they file their Great Fortunes tax declaration, they deduct the tax that they paid for the wealth tax, so to avoid the double tax.
Right. Okay. But going back to everybody's favorite income tax, I mean, what do I need to declare in the Spanish declaration?
As a Spanish tax resident, I will say that you will need to include everything.
Right.
This is including worldwide income, regardless if the income has been already paid tax at source in a different country or whatever. In essence, any pension income, state pensions, occupational pensions, private pensions, and even government pensions, which in this case are exempt from tax in Spain, but need to be included to calculate the applicable rate in Spain. Any work income, although we have some exemptions that may apply, for example, the famous 60,100 euros for work done outside of Spain. We have an article in this regard in our webpage. Right. Also, any investment income, dividends, interest, lifetime annuities, income from an economic activity.
Income from an economic activity.
If you are a self-employee, in essence, and you are receiving income, that's need to be included as well in the declaration. Actually, if you are a self-employee, you have to file whatever is your income.
Right.
That's not follow the limits. And also income from properties, rental income, or what we call here deemed income on second homes. We have discussed about this in previous interviews. This is a fictitious income for only having a second property. Even if the property is empty, even if you don't visit the property at all, you have to pay tax in Spain. The income that is supposed to generate is based on if it's Spanish property, the cadastral value, at a percentage of 1.1 or 2%, or if the property is outside of Spain. This is important because some people think that this deemed income only applies to Spanish properties, but it also applies to foreign ones. It's the 1.1% of half value of the of the property, half of the purchase price. Finally, you will also have to include any capital gains or capital losses from sale of property, shares, and any other gain. As I said before, in essence, everything.
Basically, every sort of income you have, be it property, be it a side thing, whatever, it's best to declare it. What happens if, because we are an international audience here at Talk Radio Europe, so you may get income, but it may have been taxed in the UK or somewhere else? What happens then, Claudia?
Okay, well, above the internal Spanish legislation is always the double tax treaty signed between two countries. Yeah. So with most of the countries, Spain would have signed a double tax treaty. And that double tax treaty will tell you where you need to pay the income tax. Now, for example, I'm going to take the UK double tax treaty with Spain. Yeah. If you, for example, have been taxed on rental income in the UK, which is allowed, actually, according to the tax treaty, what would happen is that tax that you have paid in the UK would be deductible from the tax you have to pay in Spain. This will also happen, for example, for the capital gains you obtain from the sale of a property, the same case. Now, for those countries that have not signed a double tax treaty with Spain, you apply the general rule, which is that tax you've paid in that country, you can just deduct directly from the tax you're going to pay in Spain.
Right.
Okay.
What about things like pensions? I mean, because obviously many of our listeners will have pensions. There are people who have a pension in the UK and they can still pay tax on the pension there rather than Spain. How does that work, Javi?
Well, indeed, it happens a lot that people think that because the pension is in the UK and they are receiving there, it can still be taxed in the UK. And in fact, this is incorrect.
Right.
The double tax treaty, as Claudia has mentioned, specifically states and clearly does that the UK cannot tax your pensions if you are a Spanish tax resident. And this tax applicable to this pension can only be paid in Spain. This is with the exemption of the government pension, which is a very particular case. Yeah. And this pension can still be taxed in the UK.
So if you are receiving a private pension and you're living in Spain,
that can only be taxed in Spain. Right. The state pension, which is a very common one, that people that are retired and come here to Spain, that also, and the problem here is that there is a lot of people that just say, okay, the pension is being taxed in the UK, I'm not going to worry about that, and I'm not going to declare that pension in Spain. That happens a lot. And this is incorrect. The Spanish tax office can come at some point and say, okay, I'm going to get this money, and then you are going to have to into a lot of trouble and fight to sort this out.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, what is the way to sort of get round to solve this issue then?
Okay, the double tax treaty will also explain how to deal with this problem. If we take the UK again as an example, and I'll follow the pension that example of Javi, what the double tax treaty states is that you need to complete a form that the Inland Revenue will provide to you.
Right, that's the UK Inland Revenue.
Yeah, to be able to get a refund and to stop you taxing in the UK. So attached to this form, you need to obtain a certificate of tax residency issued by the tax office. Now, you may have a problem there because you may have to pay tax during 2 years in two countries, and I'll explain. Imagine you just become tax resident in Spain in the year 24, so the UK is still taxing you on your pension. You can't do anything because you can't get a certificate of tax residency because you haven't filed a tax declaration. So the following year, 25, this year, like now, you are able now to submit your tax declaration, and then once you've done that, the tax office in Spain is going to issue your certificate of tax residency upon your request. Now, that means that all 24 and until June, more or less June, and they're not that efficient in Spain. It probably will be until October.
Right.
You will be paying tax in the UK now. Now, once you submit this form with the certificate of tax residency in the Inland Revenue immediately stops taxing you and will refund you all the tax paid during 25 and 24 without any problem.
So
that's how it works.
It would go backwards.
Yes,
it would backdate it, as they say.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. What about exemptions and allowances? I mean, how does these work in Spain?
Yes. Okay. These, as explained, the income is also shared between the government allowances and the regions. So I'm just going to mention the ones, the most important ones, that the general exemptions that there is, or allowances, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry. Just getting so passionate about this because it's all the different like hunters of here, there, and everywhere. It's like a patchwork quilt of allowances, So
okay, the general earnings deductions. This applies to the pensions and salaries. Okay, is 2,000, and then there's an additional deduction up to that varies according to your salary, but the maximum additional is 7,300 when your earnings are below 19,700.
Right.
Then we've got the personal allowance. Everybody has that, of 5,500. When you reach the age of 65, it increases to 6,700. And when you're over 75, it's 8,100. Okay. You've also got allowances for having children and all those.
Okay.
More children you have, more allowance, but it doesn't cover having a child.
Okay.
So, don't get happy about having.
I won't run out and have children for tax purposes. Thank you very much.
Then you've got the 60,100 allowance, which is applicable when somebody who is resident in Spain has to travel to work outside Spain. Okay. Now, this deduction is quite important, and it does have lots of inspections. So it is important that people do follow the rules, which are that in the contract of employment that you have with your employee, it is mentioned that the work has to be carried out of Spain. For example, something very, very, very normal is people who work in ships, out in the sea, or in an airplane.
Yeah, but you can't say, I'm working remotely, for example.
No.
I'm working for a British company.
No, that doesn't work. You physically have to be working. Okay, so that's why a contract is very important to have. Okay, then it is very important that the country where the work is carried out is not a tax haven, and your employer is also not is not a resident of a tax haven, or at least have a similar income tax to Spain.
Okay.
What else do we have? Oh, the very important one of the sale of your home. Now, very important, your home is the place, the property that you lived in the last 3 consecutive years before you sell it. Now, you must have lived in it as a tax resident. So, for example, somebody who had a property in Spain and was a non-resident and suddenly became a tax resident and was a non-resident 1 year and resident 2 years, it doesn't count. That person has to have an additional. So
it would be 4 years then. 1 as a non-resident and then 3 as a resident.
Always, yes. In that case, yes.
So you can't say I bought it in 2000. I became when I wasn't living here, I then lived here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Always you have to have lived in it as a resident 3 years before the sale. Now, in that case, if you're over 65, no capital gains tax to pay. If you're under 65, you need to reinvest the proceeds of the sale of the house into another home. If you reinvest partially, there's partially exemption. Another important deduction is when you're renting your property and the property does not need to be in Spain. This is something that people get it wrong. It can also be in the UK or in the US if you own a property and it's rented out. And you're renting it out for long term to individuals. So it's not an Airbnb rental.
Sure.
It is a
long-term
somebody
rental,
who's living as a home.
Yeah.
Then what you have a 50% deduction. That is really good. Okay. This can be increased up to nearly 90%, but there are specific conditions to you can look at all these deductions actually in our webpage. Yeah. Now as the general ones and also the autonomous regions, because they have things like for if you've got a electric vehicle, if you've put solar panels. They've got a Pacific if you've got children going to guarderia, but each autonomous regions have different ones. So we have a guide in our webpage, so we invite you to look at them. It's totally updated, so you can trust this guide.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the autonomous regions is an important one as well, so don't just think because you've read the Hacienda, because they do change. Anything else to take into, preparing a tax declaration?
Of course, many things, but probably I will highlight two things which are important and people don't think that much about that. The first is to make sure that your bank account is a resident bank account and it's also shows your NI number. Why? Because the tax office links you with the NI, not your name.
Right.
So if your bank account has your passport on that, when the tax office tries to process the payment, it will be like you are not that person. That payment will be cancelled. And the tax office will say, you have not paid the tax, and I'm going to apply some fines to you, etc., etc., etc. And also, you must make sure that your bank is a collaborator of the tax office. The tax office has in their website a list of all the banks. Of course, the general ones, Santander, Sabadell, etc., are included in this list. But some ones like N26, it's not the
because there are so many banks now. If you put on your mobile phone, you get hit by banks saying, "We are the new generation of banking. It's all very young and and it's like, okay, that's all very trained. That's all very good for you. But you have
some of those they say some of those banks they say, okay, you can pay your taxes through this, but it's not exactly that way. You can pay that through a transfer, but if the tax office try to direct debit the tax, they will not allow you to do that. So you need to check carefully.
This is, they like to make things, should we say interesting? Interesting, quote unquote.
Yeah.
It's like the Chinese thing, may you live in interesting times. Okay, go on then, that's one. What's the second? So I've got through that one. So what's the second one? Go on.
A very, very important one is that the tax office at all times must know where you live for receiving letters from them.
Christmas cards, happy birthday.
And this is very easy. It's done through an M030 form.
Yeah.
But if you decide to leave Spain and you do not do it, you're going to put yourself into trouble without knowing. Because why? Because the tax office, if they send you a letter asking you for something because they think you owe them more tax, and they said you've moved away to Canary, to the British Islands and not living in Spain anymore. They send this to your address.
Yeah.
They give you 10 days to respond. You don't respond. They try again. Then they issue the letter. They publish it in the bulletin. Of course, we don't read it. What happens then? They say, okay, we are right, you are wrong. So let's apply the tax. So you owe them tax. And then that part, they do find you. I don't know how they do it.
I've always said you could be in the Amazon.
They find you.
Yeah, you're in a hut somewhere talking to the indigenous tribes, and then there they are.
But the first letter, which is the letter where you defend yourself and you say, no, this is why I applied this deduction, or this is why I paid this tax. That's the one. So it is very, very important to have your address with the tax office updated every time.
Indeed. Otherwise, they will. It's like Liam Nielsen. I will find. It's the tax office. Like,
exactly.
I have a very particular. I will find. I don't know who you are and where your tax declaration is, but I will. I have a skill set, and I will find you, and I will tax you. Why would you? But if you wanted to do your own declaration, sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. But if you wanted to, if you had, if you've got nothing else to do, and you want to do your own declaration, I mean, don't laugh like that, please. We've got 1 minute and 50. Any advice for people who think they've got a simple declaration?
Yeah, and especially with the new times, I would say don't rely on ChatGPT. I mean, it's a very powerful assistant, and we use that very commonly.
People are using it to do their tax return.
But they ask ChatGPT, okay, can I do that? Can I do this? Does this deduction apply? And actually, ChatGPT responds. But ChatGPT, of course, is not a tax advisor, at least yet.
It's not a Spanish tax advisor.
It's not a Spanish tax advisor.
That's the high level,
So it may give you some, let's say, creative interpretations of the tax law. So better try to use that as an assistant, but not get his advice as something definitely, especially because a declaration might seem very simple, but there are always a lot of rules and regulations that need to be taken into consideration. If you don't have any if you have a non-Spanish income, the draft provided by the tax office will not include this income. Also, the information that the tax office has for you has been declared by other people, and these are persons that may have made mistakes, and the information that they have may be incorrect or incomplete, so will not reflect the best way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And finally, just to mention, having a digital certificate in place, it's very advisable, and we don't work with our client, and we always try to get that with our clients in advance, because it's the easiest way to check with the tax office everything.
20 seconds left of the show. If people want to find out more information, where do they go to?
To our webpage, www.spenceclarke.com, and telephone number 952822943.
As always, it's been great to have you, Claudia and Javier. Thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.